What's up, YouTube? I figured it's about time for another response video. Hang on. What's up, YouTube? I figure it's about time for another response video since Xexizy made another video about the whole Idpol thing, which seems to be very similar to his last one that I already criticized, and he hasn't really made much of a response to that yet, so I'm gonna, I guess, kind of iterate some points that I made before, since they still stand, since he's reiterating the same points he's made before. Anyways, this one is in response to a video that Mexi did. So now I want to react to that because, again, he says like a whole lot of things that I can't just cover in the comments. I left a comment, but it requires its whole video. So basically my position is, like, I don't see why identity politics is a useful label that's supposed to describe a particular thing. It doesn't make any sense to me. Identity as a basis of politics is just so vague. Like, it could be good, it could be bad, it could be so many different things. It's, you know, it's like, are you really throwing in the Black Panthers and the Ku Klux Klan together as if they're similar in any way? It's such a vague, very vague way of lumping things in together and coming up with some kind of label. So, see what he talks about here.
Cool stuff. But yeah, I'll leave her channel in the description, so do go check her out. Now, she's made a video directed to anti-Idpol leftists like myself, and while she says in the video that it is kind of directed towards specific people, she's not going to name anybody, because I do actually talk to her. I know this video is largely directed to me.
Oh, it must be about you, eh? Well, listen to you.
You're so vain.
You probably think that video was about you.
You're so vain.
You probably think, oh, I bet you think. You get the point. Enough cringe. Alright, anyways. Let's get to the rest of it.
So I did mean to actually get around to making a response video to it. It's just taking me well over a month to actually do, so I'm sorry about that. But we're doing it now, so it's alright, it's all good. But nonetheless, let's take a watch of the video. Now, it is 30 minutes long, so we are going to be shaving down a little bit, because not literally everything is, you know, directly related to...
Take a watch, mate. Alright, let's skip ahead a bit.
As socialists who are actually supposed to keep trans people who want spaces free, exactly where we're saying fuck you to, because identity politics like that encompasses all of those things. So by saying fuck you, like, it's just completely indiscriminate.
Exactly, it's a vague label. How are you saying you're against all identity politics? It's such a strange thing to declare. What is the point?
It's what Mexi's talking
It's just lazy.
about here is basically she's making this, I think, important distinction between, like, genuine, actual kind of, like, you know, movements that are trying to gain rights for certain groups of people, compared to the kind of, like, social justice caricatures that a lot of Sargonites find themselves constantly arguing with on Twitter or whatever. Yeah, no, I think this is a pretty important thing to go by, because surprisingly, actually, yeah, there are a decent amount of people on the left who haven't themselves drawn this distinction. So I think that's worth doing. But really, I don't feel like Mexi's actually given any definition of what identity politics here is. So,
well, no one can, because it's so vague. It's like we know what it is, but I don't know.
I wouldn't imagine mine is too dissimilar from hers. So I'll just give a general idea of what I think it is, and we'll go from there. But basically, as far as I'm concerned, identity politics, it's when you're, well, it's gonna sound obvious, but dealing with politics to do with identities. You know, instead of, say, you know, you take, say, the woman identity, and then this politics encompasses everything, encompasses everybody who is a woman, and it.
Well, it encompasses, yeah, all women, but it encompasses them in different ways. It affects them in different ways if you apply a lens of intersectionality to it. If you apply a lens of Marxism to it as well, it's going to be a little bit different as well. It's not as simple as just saying all women are suffering from these exact kinds of issues all in the same way, and all in, you know, in a way that requires one specific type of struggle that's going to be under bourgeois hegemony or like a liberal hegemony. It doesn't mean that at all inherently.
Affects that identity, and that is I guess pretty straightforward. But I feel like it's also kind of a method of thinking about things sometimes, as I've described in an earlier video where I talk about identity politics, where,
you know what, people call it like a postmodern ideology, but I think the term identity politics itself is postmodern. It's not talking about whether these groups are oppressed or not, whether they're dealing with tough material conditions or not. It's just referring to some vague idea about what the movement is or what it's based on, whether it's based on an identity or not. Who cares?
it's assuming, well, not assuming, but treating an identity kind of like as the same almost, because like, you know, if you think about it, racism is a form of identity politics, right? Where it's someone who's taking an identity and then applying certain things to an entire identity and then treating an entire identity in the same way. I'm not saying all identity politics is as bad as racism or something, because there are obviously genuinely people like Sargonites who go around saying that. It's just not true. But it does give you a kind of like example as to what we're thinking about here, if that makes sense.
So first of all, like, not all struggles are revolutionary. So if Ontario banned abortions tomorrow, I would be out on the shit and then post it on the internet like, you know what? Like, that's so important. It's so fucking important. And I would expect my male comrades to have my back on that. I would expect to see them standing beside me on the front lines of protest.
So she's talking about how we should all be in favor of abortion rights, and he doesn't really, I don't know,
against, you know, fighting for abortion rights and things like that. But yeah, this is just examples of fighting for things not directly related to the overthrow of capitalism, and I think that's perfectly fine to do. I mean, it's not really related to Marxist theory and stuff.
Not directly. So what?
But I mean, I don't think people who are against identity politics are necessarily against fighting for abortion rights and making quite obvious like gains for certain groups in society.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're not specifically against anything other than the bad things. So why is the problem identity politics itself? It's like they pull this magic trick. Oh, but it's not the bad things. It's not the good things that I hate about. It's only the bad things. Then why are you saying it's identity politics? Doesn't make any sense.
I think the issues lie elsewhere, and I think we'll get into those later. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say, yeah, let's have abortion rights. That's good. We'll do that.
Yeah, if it's about building a movement, then why don't you want to tap in to groups? Like, these people are already agitated and they're already organized. Some things will be directly related to the economic or to class.
Know about anti-capitalist theory to begin with, and that we should use these opportunities to teach them. That's fine. But the thing is a lot of the times, then there are other times when identity politics will be used to negate anti-capitalist or even just economic principles. I think an example of this would be when Hillary Clinton was running, and in one of her like rallies or speeches or something like that, I can't remember what it was. She was going on about you know, this because she was trying to. This was when she was still trying to smear Sanders, and she was just saying things like, "Will breaking up the banks end racism? Will it end transphobia?" And the crowd was having that resounding no every time, and things like that. That's what anti-identity politics leftists take issue with, and I feel like you take issue with that as well.
Literally everyone on the far left takes issue with that. So why are you pretending there's like this far left pro-identity politics who like when Hillary Clinton tries to demonize like anyone who wants to even break up the banks? It doesn't make any sense. This is, you know, this is an example. I left a comment on this video. This is liberalism using identity politics as a weapon, but to paraphrase the National Rifle Association, identity politics doesn't kill movements. Liberalism does. You know, like guns don't kill people, people kill people. That's kind of the point. You're attacking the weapon, but not who's wielding the weapon. Why would you attack it? Why would you come at this from that way? It doesn't make any sense.
Because, you know, it's bourgeois feminism and whatever else. But I still think it's important to highlight, because this is a very important problem that is being used to completely turn the working class off of actual economic issues. You know, Hillary is literally saying here, trying to fight racism is more important than...
But lots of people, they can use lots of things to do that. If it wasn't identity politics in that way, it would have been patriotism in the 50s during the Red Scare. They'll use any kind of scare tactics or persuasion, whatever. They'll use anything.
I would disagree with this, and you also think it would be bad. But I'm just kind of pointing to this as an example to say, yeah, no, like protesting for abortion rights and stuff, we definitely have to do that. But there are, in real life, there are fake instances where identity politics is being used by liberals to...
So we struggle against them. We don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Again, I don't think... If there is anybody saying, don't worry about literally anything until capitalism is over, please point me to them. Because I don't think anyone's saying that. Again, I might be wrong there, but I mean, I certainly don't think that. I feel like maybe when I was very new to all of this stuff, I may have, but like, I was probably younger and stupid about then. And again, like, I seriously don't think you're going to find any anti-Idpol leftist who's like, no, we shouldn't worry about fighting for abortion rights or fighting for trans people to be able to go to the fucking toilet and things like that.
But how would you even know that they want to go use the toilet if they have that problem? If you're, you know, agitating against identity politics and saying it's a cancer on the left and a poison on the left, like, what is with the contradiction here? Why would you even bother listening to these people if you think that they're just the act of them getting together and advocating for themselves is a bad thing. Which you obviously you don't, but it's like you're almost lying and saying you are against it by saying you're against identity politics. It's again, makes no sense.
But of course, that's not to say, you know, lefty pol isn't full at the moment of fucking Sargonites who have a fetish for the color red and just use anti-identity politics to thinly veil their blatant, like, actual racism or actual transphobia and stuff.
Yeah,
But those people
happens.
exist, okay? And they're scum, and I get that. But that doesn't, like, negate from the action.
And you're giving them cover by legitimizing this whole anti-identity politics thing. But go on.
Real kind of arguments that are being made by people who don't just hate these people and are looking for an excuse for it. Unfortunately, yeah, those people exist, but I wouldn't call them fucking. I wouldn't say they count in this, to be honest.
There are so many things that we just do not know about, that we cannot know about, and that we will not know about.
Okay, so I think you and me have different ideas of what the right to narrate is, in a sense. So that
All right,
so
this
let's
is something about the right to narrate. I don't know. I think I already discussed this in my last response. The right to narrate, I think, is really just about saying you ought to give deference to people who have a lived experience of something. Not that any one of them is the definitive representative of that group or anything like that, but just you ought not to be so dismissive that you just doubt them without really hearing it out. And you ought to remember that a lot of things you can only understand after walking a mile in someone's shoes, so to speak.
it's a terrible thing and that it should be outlawed and all that stuff. But she's a woman. Is her opinion more valid than mine? No, because I have the correct opinion.
No,
it's
that's
that
not
simple.
the point.
Like, so that's for me where my
So it's one consideration. It's not like the only consideration. Like if a woman wants to like ban voting for women, then we have to listen to her. Like it's just a ridiculous straw man.
contention with the right to narrate comes from, where we start bringing in people's identities about the validity of their views. And I totally understand.
They don't understand the validity of their views. They're and it's not even about the identity itself. It's about whether they actually suffer oppression as a result of that identity. And it's not even really about the identity at all. It's about whether they suffer from that oppression. But we use the identity as sort of a shorthand of saying, you know, people of color. What we really mean is racialized people who suffer from racism. So it's a little bit of this is semantics, right? Because not every person of color is going to experience racism in a significant way or almost at all in some cases, and you're always going to have, you know, the Larry Summers or the Milo Yiannopoulos and all those other, you know, douchebags.
That yes, some identities are probably going to have more experience in some things, and therefore they'll probably have more things to say. They're going to be more concerned about these things. That's perfectly fine. But when it actually comes down to the arguments themselves, if those things are true, then they'll present themselves naturally, unless there's some kind of reason as to why they're being kind of like pushed down, which is another topic, I think, which we'll talk about later, I think. But when you actually, when we're actually talking about just arguments themselves, yes, like you can say it's more likely that these people are going to have better arguments because of their like identity, but it's not always true, as I've pointed out with just abortion.
Not even that they have better arguments, just that their arguments are informed by something that other people don't necessarily have knowledge to access to that knowledge.
You know, just because you're part of that identity doesn't mean you're actually going to have a decent opinion on that.
Of course.
You're more likely to, but it doesn't mean you will. And again, it then gets to that point where I brought up the Zizek quote in a past video, where if you take it to the point where, you know, you can't judge people of certain identities because you don't understand their experiences, which again is something that people do believe, I think to a lesser extent than the other one. But if you get to that point, well then, what's to stop you from saying, oh, well, you couldn't judge the Nazis because you didn't really understand their experiences that they were going through?
And again, he brings up this, like, I don't care if Zizek said it. That doesn't mean it makes any sense. The Nazis were not an oppressed group, so why would you even make that comparison? It doesn't make any sense. That's not the point of what anyone's saying. Like, nobody considers them oppressed in the first place, so why is that even an argument?
Shit. I'm not going to respond to it because it's just not my kind of like area, I guess.
And from just like a
In my videos on Twitter, all that stuff, just because, you know, it does upset some people and it does offend some people, and it's just I don't want to upset people and make them feel uncomfortable. That's just fair enough. But the thing is, like, and I think everyone else should kind of go with that, and you should be polite in a sense.
So he's saying here,
attention to what they're saying and pay attention to whether they're hurting other people around them.
Okay, so yeah, with the slurs thing, yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. I mean, I've decided it's probably not the best idea to use slurs. I mean, I've decided I'm going to stop using them in my videos on Twitter, all that stuff, just because, you know, it does upset some people and it does offend some people, and it's just I don't want to upset people and make them feel uncomfortable. That's just fair enough. But the thing is, like, and I think everyone else should kind of go with that, and you should be polite in a sense. Then you have places like Idpol, which is like, you know, slurs thrown around all the place and everywhere. But I think what's unique about Idpol is it's kind of like a designated place for that. So it's kind of like, if you're not comfortable with slurs, then don't go there, and no one's gonna throw them in your face, and that's fine. And this is just where people just want to like use the terms ironically and all of that stuff. And they do have their own problems with like actual genuine fucking Nazbols and stuff cropping up, but that's just shitty moderation. But this is a whole another thing. But anyway, but then you have the other extreme, okay, where you have our socialism are banning people for saying, I don't know if they're still doing, but they have done this, for saying the word stupid because it offends people.
It's still against the rules, but I don't think they're outright banning people just for saying it. Like, this is kind of a couple different things here. Like, yes, the rule does seem kind of overly restrictive, but there was also scandals about them being, you know, too overzealous with their moderation policies. So there's a little bit of conflation here. Like, you can argue about whether or not it's a good policy to have. I mean, obviously, it's two conflicting interests. One of being members of disabled people, probably a minority within that group that really have a problem with it. Are they more important than everyone else in their right to express themselves if it includes words that they consider to be slurs? It's a legitimate argument, I think. But we can ban stuff like, you know, the very obvious slurs right away, and then the other ones, it's like, what I try to do is just say, you know, you made a good point there, but we usually tend to not use words like that because it has a certain implication. You know, I think we just need to be reasonable with this and just say, hey, maybe you shouldn't use words like that. But if someone's getting banned on site for it, obviously that's an overzealous overstepping of the mods, but that's not quite the same. That's like sort of a problem with the mods being overzealous, I think.
Right? So, again, it gets to this extreme point where it is genuinely holding back socialist movements. I don't know if you can call Reddit a socialist movement, but it is the first point of contact for pretty much anyone who is researching socialism online.
Understand what this means, but that like the methods of attaining socialism will just automatically solve every other issue, and I don't understand quite what those methods are because they haven't really been clearly articulated to me.
Okay, so the whole socialism is going to solve everything thing. So yeah, I've explained this before, but I can explain it again here. That's fine. So basically, when Marxists talk about socialism ending racism and sexism and all that stuff, we're talking about it ending systematic racism, sexism, and all of that stuff. So basically, we're not saying that overnight, like the day after the revolution, everything is going to be perfectly fine and everyone's going to have all the rights and all of that stuff. But when you look at it, when you kind of analyze things in the sense that capitalism perpetuates racism, for instance, or class society, before class society, women didn't have the traditional gender roles that they do today and weren't nearly as oppressed in the same way that they were today. When you look at those things, it kind of just seems logical that if you remove class society and if you remove capitalism, then things will go back to how they were before capitalism and class society, and that you don't have people being constantly having their anger constantly redirected to the most vulnerable people.
Not on their own, though. You still have to struggle against it.
In society who tend to be immigrants, and then have this anger based on their race a lot, and ethnicity a lot as well, which, you know, rises racial tensions and then gives rise to right-wing populism, as we see with UKIP or Trump. And you won't have these traditional rigid gender roles that have women, you know, as the housewives and stuff. And as capitalism has kind of gone into late-stage capitalism, a lot of first world families have been able to come out of this. But the vast majority of the world still can't do this, and they won't be able to do this until we end capitalism. That's just how that is. Okay? Because the very function of capitalism relies on this unpaid housework that wives do to support the family and to keep them in the kind of like loop of the industrial fucking production. You know, and unless we want to actually go to what some places in China are doing and have basically fucking neo-feudalism, where they may not be great, but I'm going to say it's better than neo-feudalism. Dialectical thing. God, I hate saying the word dialectical because I just sound like a tank throws it around for no reason. But anyway, it is a dialectical thing. Where it's not going to just happen overnight. It will take time for people to kind of get in that mindset and for those effects that capitalism has had to wear off, and for new generations to rise up, to be raised in the society where there are no longer traditional gender roles and that they no longer have any preconceived notions of gender anymore. But that's going to take time. But there is no other way to go about doing it, I'm afraid. If you want to do things like abolish gender, then you have to abolish capitalism, because you just read Engels' Origin of Family on that. But I feel like, Mexi, you probably have read that.
But what's the point? Who are you arguing against? Are you arguing against liberals? Why don't you just say that you're arguing against liberals then? Why, like, what anti-capitalist is going to, what Marxist is going to disagree with this? I don't understand what the point is here.
But if you haven't though, I need to get around to reading it. But I've seen talks that go over it, and I've read a bit about it, and it is meant to be really fucking good. But it basically explains roughly what I'm explaining right now, except in much more detail and much more stuff. Basically, yeah, my main point I'm coming down to here is that it's capitalism and class society that perpetuates systematic racism and sexism, so that we can only end systematic racism and sexism by ending capitalism. And in the meantime, we can do things like you know, abortion rights or transgender toilets or whatever, and those are great things to achieve, but ultimately they don't solve the root problems.
The people are transgender, not the toilets, just to be clear.
And it's only socialism that can solve the root problems. No one is ever saying ever that don't worry about anything, because the day after the revolution, everything's going to be fine.
What are you saying?
Okay, it's really not what's being said here. It's, well, what I just explained is what's being said, I suppose. Another way to come at it is,
like, who doesn't know that? Who do you think you're arguing against? I don't understand it.
A lot of people, something I wanted to talk about earlier, in regards to the right to narrate, I'm saying, yeah, let people voice their concerns, voice their problems around their identity. That's perfectly fine, and we'll listen to them. However, I don't think you've touched on it here, Mexi, but I've seen it said a lot before, and that these people don't, due to their identity and due to kind of like social conditioning, they don't have like the confidence or something, or I'm not an expert on this, I'm afraid, but they just don't speak up for whatever reason. And I feel like, yeah, this is probably a problem that we can't just solve by just sitting back and letting people come to us. So while we can make gains towards fixing that, and we should make gains, you have to realize that the sole reason people are being brought up in this culture to think this way, that they shouldn't speak up to begin with, is due to the material conditions that are created and perpetuated by capitalist society to begin with. So in order to properly fix this, like, we can make gains to help it, but to actually fix it, we have to end capitalism. There's just no two ways about that. And I guess this is the difference between, you know, liberal feminism and... I don't think Marxist feminism is even a thing, though. I feel like people who call themselves Marxist feminists are just people who used to be liberal feminists but then read Marx.
What? People who used to be liberal feminists and just read Marx? Like, Marxism gave them an entirely new understanding of feminism in a way that places the blame on the capitalist system and you know, synthesizes that into the theory and explains how, you know, women's oppression is tied in with class oppression and class society and capitalism. How can you just say it's like just liberal feminists who just read Marx as if it's just like a haphazard gluing them both together and like that? Like, do you know anything about Marxist feminism? Because I feel like I've learned more about it I haven't even gone to university. I just learned about it in sociology class in community college. And even I know that.
But the thing is, this whole idea of feminism is already kind of imbued in Marxism, in that when you actually don't liberate based on identity, you liberate based on class. So to liberate, Marxism doesn't liberate women, it liberates the working class and everybody involved in the working class, right? But then it also...
But who cares? What's the point of the distinction here?
Goes ways to abolish gender without even intending to. This is just something that happens because you ended capitalism and class society.
But you have to intend to do it, otherwise it will just take forever. What is the point in pretending that you're not doing something that you want to do? It doesn't make any sense.
So, yeah, I think I've got my points across there. But yeah, actually, I feel like we pretty much agree on the same stuff. I feel like we just both have different connotations when it comes to this issue, and we both think about different things when we start talking about identity politics. But hopefully, me making this video has helped kind of reframe where I'm coming from and the issues that I have, and maybe you'll make a response to this, or you leave a comment, whatever you want to do. I'm open to it. If you want to have a discussion, actually, if you like a live stream or something, I'm down for that as well.
I do still want to have a discussion. But he's saying this to Mexi, unfortunately.
Well, it can be quite chilled because I'm not too...
It can be chilled like a drink?
I perfectly realize that I'm not too, you know, read up on this or anything, but I still feel like the concerns I'm raising are valid ones. I hope they are. If they're not, again, tell me. But yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy this video, though. And I'm sorry that this is kind of a bit low effort one, and that the last few videos have been a bit low effort as well. But I do promise...
That's okay. This video is pretty low effort, too. Anyways, that's about it. That's about all I had to say. See you later.